Diet culture is this set of societal expectations that we should all eat in a certain way that promotes thinness, that stigmatizes fatness, that sort of puts a lot of morality on different food choices and eating patterns. And so diet culture is just, it's everywhere. It influences policy. It influences the way medical care is given. It influences fashion, celebrity. There's so many things that diet culture like has its hands on. So I would say the systems that influence diet culture, first and foremost, we can't separate them, is like the white supremacist culture of that there's a certain type of person, there's a certain type of body that's better than the rest. It starts infiltrating and trickling down, like everyone wants to be like the ideal. Yeah. And we start to put a lot of pressure on things that aren't going to make us more like the ideal, but make us think we can become the ideal. So I think food and exercise becomes one of those things where like people try to gain control by manipulating the use of those two things. But I really think of it as this set of societal expectations that most importantly promotes thinness and demonizes other types of bodies. There's just so many ways that the messaging we're given about certain foods will demonize some and propel others into this superfood status. Diet culture has made us fearful that there are good choices and bad choices. If you make a bad choice, then you failed.
My name is Helen Garcia, and you're listening to Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast. Let's start the show. Eling, welcome to the show. Eling Tsai. I'm happy to have you here. Before we start talking about deep dive stuff, I always like to ask guests open questions, just warm you up a bit.
Cool.
But what's your high-low buffalo? So buffalo is the weirdest thing that's happened to you this week. And from last Monday to now Monday, the high of your week and the low of your week.
Oh my gosh. I have to think about it for a second.
Isn't it such a cool question?
I love that question. You said the weirdest thing.
So high-low buffalo is the best part of your week, something that made you super happy. Low is the worst part of your week. And then buffalo is something weird and unexpected that happened to you this week.
My low of the week, my daughter, 8 months old, she's always been this amazing sleeper since she was born. So lucky. I used to be,
That's
awesome. Used to be such a flex. Oh yeah, she's sleeping this at night. I don't know why. And then suddenly last week, we started this streak of up every night at 4 a.m. And I have to say that was pretty low because that part of her baby phase was over and we couldn't explain it. She was just up every night. We tried all sorts of different things. Every day we tried different strategies to see if it helped her sleep through the night. And she just wasn't. She would just be up. And so it was that moment of, is this just it forever? Every night it was the same thing. We'd be up at 3:34 in the morning. So that was pretty low. The last 2 nights have been okay. So I don't know what was going on. She was just having a moment, but that was rough on just the exhaustion was real for sure.
How do you balance that? Because as a new mom, I feel like you work full time as well, and you have a family. You're living in one of the busiest cities in the world. Was it a sacrifice to not be sleeping? Because the last 3 days, I'm sure you probably were exhausted. How do you look at family and rest and all of that, given your new role as a mom?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I think I had to change my expectation of what I can do and what I should do or let go of. It used to bum me out if I was pretty tired. That used to be a marker of, I didn't take good care of myself or I didn't rest. And now I'm tired all day. And this is just such a downer. But I've been able to shift that with her because we're all just doing our best. And sometimes it just means we're tired. Doesn't mean we're not showing up for the people we need to show up for, but we're just human and have lots of things going on. So I think that just helped me really take the pressure off myself. If she's going to be up at 3:30 a.m. and I'm going to be up with her, what can I do about it?
I really hear what you're saying of yes, I'm tired, but I love it. Like it sounds like you love being a mom and you love the experience of getting to do that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has helped me change my perspective of like tired, because I was actually just thinking about this with my husband, I think not too long ago. It's like, yeah, yes, we're tired, but so far your cup gets filled back up just as much as it kind of you're draining a little bit,
Right.
because there's just so many great positive inputs as well. I'm definitely net more tired than I used to be, but I'm also enjoying it. And just, I try to remember like nothing is permanent. There will be future challenges being a mom. Currently the challenge is being tired, but I'm sure that'll change and become something new. So
it'll change and become a different tired later on.
Yeah, something new will happen.
What was the weirdest part of your week? Something that kind of threw you off guard?
This question's interesting. Not to bring it always back to, I feel like all of these answers have been related to being a mom, but I think it's just very top of mind.
You're allowed to be human.
Thank you. I think the weirdest part of my week was, and I'm sure really great, silly things happen that I'm just not thinking of. I think the weirdest part of my week was noticing that this time last year, I was entering my third trimester, and like, I was just in a really different headspace. I was experiencing the summer so differently. And then this week, it was really something about this week. I just started to look around. I started to notice other people who are pregnant, other people who are in the place I was this time last year. And it was really weirding me out.
Moment.
Yeah. But in a really I was really weirded out by it. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because I couldn't fathom a year had passed, or like maybe I was nostalgic, or maybe sad that I wasn't in that very special place anymore, because it was like such a blip. And I don't know, when you said weird, that's what came to mind.
It's so
and I'm
wild.
Sure a bunch of other weird stuff happened, but I don't know. That was the one where I felt like I was in a time loop.
It's hilarious because my friend, you talk about you're in your third trimester, and like now a year from now, it's weird experiencing it again, but not pregnant.
Yeah.
And my best friend who I was a bridesmaid at her wedding, like good friends with her husband, visit them often. She's in her third trimester. She's having her baby in about a month. And I was asking her, I was like, Kate, how do you feel? Like, your baby's due in a month on the 27th. August 27th is when she's due. She was like, honestly, Helen, I'm not thinking about it. Like, I really don't want to think about it, that's going to happen to my body. Like, my body is going to change. And she talks about this, and we'll probably get into this later. It's like, my relationship to food has changed. Like, I feel so happy that I get to eat whatever I want and be around my family. And just like, her birthday was yesterday. And I was like, oh, I wonder, now that you've mentioned it, I was like, I wonder if that's what happens to moms. It's like, first time mom, I just don't want to think about having the baby. And then a year later, like having that like flashback of, oh, I was there in that moment. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's such a weird, I feel like it's I think this probably happens in across a lot of different transitions, like not exclusive to having a child, but where you are in a point where all you can do is daydream, and all you can do is kind of wonder. And then to be in a place where you can then be like, oh, I used to really wonder what this is going to be like, and now I'm in it, and it probably looks so different than what you imagine. But it's like that. I think that was what was really standing out to me. I was like, wow, this time last year, I had just no idea, and I was just full of questions. I was full of question marks. I had hopes, of course, or desires. I also had just lots of things I was scared of, but I just I didn't know. I had no clue. So it just felt like a very interesting experience to recognize, like, oh, I have so much more information than I did a year ago. And I couldn't have possibly gotten this information then. And I just had to try it out. And I'm sure we can all relate to that in different parts of our life.
I relate to that. I was running on the treadmill, and how you run, it like tracks your mileage, right? And I was looking at it because we had to run and then pace ourselves. And so it was like 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. I was like, oh, every step creates progress. And I think that like before, the way that I looked at my body and fitness, I was like, I have to get 3 miles in. I have to get 2 miles in. And sometimes like the fear of not reaching that expectation keeps you from really enjoying like the slow progress of like tick, tick. And I was like, oh, something has changed inside of me because I'm just excited to like move. I'm like excited to move my body. And so when you talked about how like the things I knew then, I was struggling with so much fear because I was entering this transition. I just needed to go through it. Like I just needed to make it through that season.
Yeah.
You know? Did you ever have one of those like light bulb moments similar to that?
Oh my, I feel like all of the time. Actually, I had a really big light bulb moment. I do feel like I have those all the time, probably because I have to like actively put podcasts or do something experiential. Otherwise I'll just sit here and just be like, oh my gosh, can you believe? Yeah. Like I was talking
I feel like you're really introspective. I can sense that from you.
Thanks. I don't know if that's a thing, but I'm learning that about myself. I think I used to not see myself that way, but I'm realizing I totally am. I was having a conversation with a couple of my friends. We were at dinner and they were all just, what's the one thing recently that has blown your mind? Wow. And I landed on just, someone else had said this. So I was copying their response. I had heard someone else say this in a different conversation where it's just that thought that everything you do has an infinite number of creates an infinite number of possibilities. Started talking about that movie Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow, which was like such a pivotal rom-com back in my day, like in middle school. Sliding Doors is just, oh my gosh, life is insane.
And that movie blew my mind too.
Yes, I know. And we were all saying we need to rewatch it and see if it still holds up. But that was the one that was a light bulb, a little bit of it turned into a series of light bulb moments just about, we really, any choice we make, whether it was like I ordered this drink or that drink at dinner, that's not a significant choice, but you never know what type of conversation that would have led to, or like what experience that would have led to. Just like really little things like that. I was like, this is blowing my mind. I don't know what to do with this. Yeah.
I had a similar experience yesterday because I got invited to my friend's birthday party, like my best friend I was telling you about. And before I was about to go, I wanted to go stop at a bakery that I always go to for tea cakes. And the place was closed down. And so I just went on Google Maps and I searched like bakeries. I went to the bakery and I had no idea what I was going to order, but I just had this conversation with this guy like, hey, I don't know what to order. Can you just place a box for me? And I just had this conversation with him. He gave me this look. I'm going to give you 2 macaroons for free, just for being nice. And then I like immediately made my day better. And I had this like sliding doors moment with myself of if I just did what I usually do, I don't think I would approach going to this new place with a level of curiosity and like giddiness that I went to a new place. And then I approached the birthday party with a different energy of, hey, everyone, like I got this like different place. We have to try it. Like I've never tried this before. And my best friend was like, Helen, you know, that place is right across the street from me, right? And I was like, no, I literally wasted 30 minutes of my life. And we just had this conversation and we tried these like different tea cakes. And then she ended up getting so excited. And I was like, I wonder what would have happened if I just did what I usually do. And you know how your brain is able to play those 2 paths? It's just like wild to me how we have that imagination.
Yes. Oh, and you just nailed something that we brought up at dinner. We were talking about this. Everything you do has all these infinite possibilities. And we're all reflecting on what's the one thing you just go back and you're like, I can't believe that happened that way. Or what was that pivotal moment? And this one girl, she just sums up. She's like, wait, after hearing everyone, she was like, everyone's example that they gave of that sort of sliding doors moment is when they did something out of character that they feel is out of character for them. And it was true for all of us had given examples of, wow, what's that one moment you just look back and you're just like, wow, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be right here. And all of them were us stepping out of just doing something we thought was weird or something we wouldn't usually do. Those are the moments that stand out as to what created the situation we're in now that we're happy about. Wow. So yeah, that's I could talk about this stuff forever.
I feel like I told you my week because you told me about your week already. But my low is probably, I haven't told you my low though, because I've told you like weird things that have happened. My low is probably, I don't think I have a low this week. It's good. unravel low.
Yeah, nothing stands out. I love it.
Nothing stands out. Nothing bad has happened, knock on wood. But I think that we made a transition into what we wanted to talk about, because one thing that we did before we started this podcast episode is I asked you a ton of questions about your life. And Eling, if you would have done what was in character for you, you would have become a doctor or just gone straight into the career of public health. But you found yourself in this place of educating people on nutrition and anti-racism and its connection to nutrition. And so tell me about like the catalyst moment for you of how you got into this place of helping people unlock like a new relationship to food and like life and what it means to be filled.
Yeah, thanks. I can think of a few pivotal moments, and I would say like pivotal people in my life that like got me to where I am now. And I'm so thankful for those relationships. And of course, they're the ones that seemed totally insignificant at the time that they happened. But I pretty classic story, like college, med school, had that last minute freak out of, I don't think this is what I chose for myself. I think this is what I thought I had to do. I think I had put a lot of pressure on myself, given the different inputs I've had in my life. I thought I had chosen it, but I think I realized I didn't.
And you had taken the MCAT already at that point, right?
Yep.
Everything was already set.
Oh my gosh. I took the MCAT. Wow. I applied to schools. I think I was in like a second round application type of process. I think I can't remember the details now, but it was a very heavy application process. You had to like submit your first round of things and then submit a second round of things. Wow. I was right then and there. I remember that's when I called my mom and I was like, I think I have a different idea of what I want to do. And of course it was a risk, but it wasn't even that wild at the time. I think I was flipping my whole life upside down. But that was when I made the decision. I'm going to go to grad school for public health instead. I want to relate to health differently than medicine. I want to work on the more preventative side of things. I want to work on a population level. I like learning. I wanted to go pursue a graduate degree in something anyway. So that was the initial shift.
You already knew that? You already knew you wanted to do public health, or you were processing it out loud with someone and then that kind of happened?
I think my memory of it is that the decision was made all in one. I didn't think I could just, again, going back to I felt I had to do a lot of things. I'm not sure I really did, but at that time I just had this feeling like I have to come up with an alternative plan B on the same day I decide not to go to med school, like that type of
so wild
experience. Yeah. And I think
I just kind of followed your gut.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I tried. I really tried. And I was really happy with the decision to go to grad school. Public health was a really nice place for me to land. I think it helped me think about things differently and exposed me to just lots of interesting people. I loved grad school. I really did. And I went right out of college. So I was really young and really inexperienced and honestly naive. And I met people who had worked for a while already or were very curious and smart. And it was just a good experience for me. I feel really lucky. But I think leaving grad school, I had that, again, a little bit of, God, what do I do now? I have to apply this information or apply this education to something. And I was a little adrift, I'll be honest. I didn't feel like a health policy person. I didn't feel like a research person. I decided to go the route of nonprofit work and more like on the advocacy side of things. And that's what I did. I moved to New York. I worked for a couple of years at a really small nonprofit where we did advocacy work on behalf of community centers and a place where public health is implemented. And
was that hard, moving to a city by yourself? And two of your cousins live in the city, but that sounds pretty brave, to leave what you know.
Thanks. And my cousins didn't even live here at the time. And so it did feel what I had, though. I had the two at the time, and still most important people to me. My best friend from grad school, who's still one of my very best friends, we decided to move to New York together. Just like a classic, we don't know what we're doing. Let's just move to the city. We were roommates. And so that was such a safety thing. And then my now husband was just my boyfriend of a year at the time. And he lived here and it was that classic. Don't move here because of me. And I really I think he probably, I wouldn't, at the time I probably was like, definitely not. I'm moving here with my friend. We're going to be roommates and we're just going to have a great old time. And you're just living over there.
So you guys are long distance.
Yeah, we were long distance for just a little bit.
Oh, okay. And you met in grad school or no?
No. Oh my gosh. We met in Florida where I grew up. He was my sliding doors moment that I was talking about at dinner with my friends. Yeah, there's a whole journey there, but we met in Florida. He moved to New York on his own. I was in grad school. We reconnected. I then graduated and made the decision to move to New York. And so many things had to go the way they did for all of that to happen because So, and then 12 years later, no, it really is not, but there are moments of it where I'm like, oof, you couldn't write it any better. Yeah. And now it's been like, never would have imagined we'd have a kid here. I think at the time we approached it all as very temporary to move to the city. Yeah. And so I moved here and I found this job. I was working for a couple of years and I think I was still feeling like I haven't touched what I really want to do yet. I was like, this is a nice space. I could tell that the people who do it, like my colleagues, were in the place they needed to be. Like, this is the type of work they're passionate about and good at. And I started to feel like I have other strengths that I'm not tapping into. And nutrition was, to be honest with you, I think I entered the world of nutrition. I got the idea of nutrition because I had this desire to help people or to have some sort of influence on people's well-being. But I was probably thinking about it in a pretty narrow way, not at all how I'm thinking about it now. Yeah. So I thought, hey, nutrition is a way I can connect with people, help them with, I'm using quotes when I say help because I feel like sometimes that can be such a loaded term.
Such a loaded word. How do I help you?
Yeah, especially like coming from the nonprofit space. It's not, it can be a complicated term, but yeah, that's how I decided to like, hey, I'm going to take a risk again. I'm going to go back to school again. I'm going to do the whole dance of letting everyone know I'm changing my path a little bit. And luckily I had a really supportive network. Most people I talked to were like, I could see you doing that. That feels like a good idea. And I had same thing with not going to med school. I had a little bit of a plan. I went back to school while I was working full time. And then, oh my gosh, Helen, so much happened. I moved to Taiwan for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry, this is such an aside, but I spent that time pursuing my nutrition education.
In Taiwan?
Distance. Like I did like a distance learning program. I didn't have to get a whole degree. I just had to take a couple more classes in order to qualify to be trained as a dietitian because I already had a bunch of science classes under my belt. And I came back, I applied for the dietetic internship, which is like the clinical training you have to do to become a dietitian. I got placed. It's a matching program. I got placed back in New York. And that was a while ago now. That was like over 6 years ago. Yeah, I did my training in New York. I got my first job as a dietitian in New York, and here I am.
I want to pause here because I was taking notes while you were saying your story. You said something that like really, I think, catalyzes your, I think, intuitiveness, because you're so intuitive and you listen to yourself when you're not on the right path. And I think that's really rare I can only really speak for myself. When it comes to my life, I think as a 1.5 gen immigrant, I was always taught to do what made sense. And it's only now in this season of my life at 26 years old that I feel like I'm allowing myself permission to have a posture of surrender. You said when I was working in public policy and nonprofit, I felt like different people were living their dreams, but I haven't even touched my dreams. And then you talk about giving yourself permission to go to Taiwan, to get a nutrition education. Was that instinct to follow your path? Was that an easy decision to make? Or how do you know when that decision comes up? Is it like a gut instinct in your body? Is it just a knowing? Do you have dreams about it? Because I feel like it really, knowing the audience of Yellow Chair Collective, intuition is something that we almost lose the art of.
Yeah. Yeah. I think none of it was easy. I definitely felt like the gut instinct part was the part where I was like, this is nice, but not totally right for me. I was never ever unhappy in my careers. I was always like, this is pretty nice. I think I could do this. I think I'm doing an okay job. But the gut part was really like, but I know this is not totally it. But the process of following through with that, I think is always really hard. I lived with a lot of fear of what people would think, what my parents would think, if it was like, quote unquote, the right choice, a sustainable choice. Is it a good financial choice? Like those types of things I really thought a lot about and worried a lot about. And I think the things that I'm very lucky to have in my life are parents who just, they guide me a lot. But I think ultimately over the course of our relationship, I'm 35 now, but over the course of me becoming a young adult and an adult, they've learned to trust me a lot more. And I've learned to trust myself a lot more too, and not place these like assumptions on myself that my parents are asking me to do something that they maybe actually never did. So like that whole process made it a lot scarier for me. And then I realized like, hey, I'm trusting myself. They're trusting me. This is going to be okay. So yes, I do think there's a gut feeling always, for me at least. I feel lucky that like I can sense that. But then the implementation of that is I'm always a little anxious about it. I can't say that totally went easy, but I'm glad I did.
But you're glad you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's this interesting journey of being like the only child of a Taiwanese family, the oldest of all your cousins. You have this dream of going to medical school. As soon as you're about to jump into a new decision, like your gut calls you to jump into public health. You have this plan. You go into a career in public health. You enjoy your time there. You realize that it's not exactly a fit for you. You don't feel like you totally belong there. Then you move to Taiwan for 2 years, take a distance learning like program, take classes, go back to New York, start your new career as a nutritionist. And then what? Then what happened?
Yes. Then what happened was I took some pretty traditional roles as a dietitian. I worked at a doctor's office. I worked at a youth shelter in Manhattan as their dietitian, on-site dietitian. I was really still very much in that like melding community health and nutrition and dietetics. I felt like I was still really pulling from my public health side of me, but more so in this counseling. The day-to-day was like, I'm a counselor, not a policy person and not like a program development person, but like I'm the face-to-face person with the people that these organizations serve. And I did that. Speaking of just like those people you meet and you don't really know that they're going to totally change things for you. During my training, like way before when I was still going back to school for nutrition, I had an assignment. The assignment was like, go interview a dietitian and just write a little blurb about what they do. It was just like the most basic little homework assignment. And I just I swear, I opened Google, I typed in dietitian Brooklyn. The first person who came up who seemed like with close proximity to me and who interested me was my now colleague, Lindsay Krasma, who is an awesome dietitian. And I emailed her. I was just like, hi, I'm a dietetics student and my homework assignment is to interview a dietitian. She was so kind. She let me come to her office and just interview her for 45 minutes about the job. She had a private practice, a new private practice at the time. And that was it. That was my assignment. We said, thanks, goodbye. And it was like, fast forward years later. Yeah. Years later, it was during COVID, it was 2020. I had been working in those other settings. Lindsay emailed me and was like, hey, I thought about you. I'm expanding my practice. I thought of you. How are you? And that conversation led to me joining her practice, which specializes in eating disorders and disordered eating, and really, I think, has brought me to a place of like true fulfillment in my career with nutrition. It's those moments where you don't expect something to turn into anything at all. But I'm so glad that I had that experience meeting Lindsay and that she continued to think of me in her own business, because it led me to a place where, I really am connecting with this now. Like I see it, and I really enjoy this specialty that I'm in within the world of nutrition.
Wow. I relate to your story because I told you this. I was going to go to medical school, and then I ended up going to grad school instead, and then pursued a career as a therapist, was unhappy in my work. And then somehow I had a mentor who told me about yellow chair. And now I feel more fulfilled than I've ever been in my life because of the ability to work with a population like this. And if I never ask you this question, I feel like I would be the worst interviewer ever, Eling. But like, why food? Like, why concentrate on like community health and people's relationship to food? And like, how do you define it? Like when, if we're defining terms here, like what does food mean to you? How do you conceptualize food and nutrition?
Yeah, I think the why food was that like I personally really connect to food. I personally enjoy it, and it brings me excitement and pleasure, and I loved cooking. So I think that was like the why food. It was just, hey, this totally makes sense. This is like just right within, it fits in with a hobby of mine almost. And I think maybe it's not the so out of the box way to think about what you should do for work, but I was like, hey, this is just like something I just absolutely love, this part of life. And so that is the why food for me. But I think then thinking about, okay, how do I turn this into a career? Oh, that's how I got into nutrition, and so on and so forth, and got to where I am now. My thinking about the word nutrition has evolved so much. I think when I was thinking why food, okay, I'm super into food. I'm in the public health space. Like nutrition just makes a ton of sense. Then I was thinking about nutrition as, hey, let's find the healthy way to do things. Let's make communities healthy. I think I had this very vague understanding of what nutrition really meant. Wow. And I think it was pretty much more aligned with diet culture than I realized at the time. Hey, there's a good way to be eating. There's not a good way to be eating. Like how does the field of dietetics like help people find the good way of eating? I think I really do. When I reflect back, I think that was what influenced a lot of my original inspiration for a career in nutrition. As I've grown as a dietitian, as I've become exposed to all the different systems at play that influence diet culture, that influence the way we connect with food, I realized, wow, I really had a misunderstanding of nutrition. I was thinking about it through this diet culture perspective, that there's just one good way that we should all be eating. Wow. And now I feel like, particularly because of my specialty, but aside from it, I think it benefits us to think more freely and creatively about what a relationship with food and nutrition is, and not just, hey, there's one good way to be eating, we should all eat that way.
Wow.
Yeah. So my relationship with nutrition has changed a lot, in the way I think about the word nutrition has changed as well.
Can you unpack that for me? What are the systems at play in how we see diet culture? Yeah. Maybe start with what diet culture is and what systems guide it after.
Great. Yes. Diet culture is just this set of societal expectations that we should all eat in a certain way that promotes thinness, that stigmatizes fatness, that sort of puts a lot of morality on different food choices and eating patterns. And so diet culture is just, it's everywhere. It influences policy. It influences the way medical care is given. It influences fashion, celebrity. There's so many things that diet culture like has its hands on. And so, I would say the systems that influence diet culture, first and foremost, we can't separate them. It is like the white supremacist culture of that there's a certain type of person, there's a certain type of body that's better than the rest. It starts infiltrating and trickling down. Like everyone wants to be like the ideal. Yeah. And we start to put a lot of pressure on things that aren't going to make us more like the ideal, but make us think we can become the ideal. So I think food and exercise becomes one of those things where like people try to gain control by manipulating the use of those two things. And yeah, there's probably so many better ways to describe diet culture, but I really think of it as this set of societal expectations that most importantly promotes thinness and demonizes other types of bodies. And I didn't get into the world of nutrition to talk about weight, but as soon as I stepped foot in it, I realized, oh, this is all about weight. It's not about one's relationship with food or access to food necessarily. It's about like, how do we make everyone control their weight? And yeah, I felt totally confused and nervous. I made a bad choice, honestly, when I realized how much diet culture was just all over everything. I realized, I don't want to be a parrot for diet culture. It's very hard not to be as a dietitian. People expect that from you. And most of the job opportunities require you to essentially do that. And so I felt I had to really step carefully in terms of what I wanted to do within this field.
Wow. You said so many wise things. You said diet culture mainly focuses on weight and whiteness, and there are several systems in play of white supremacy, of there's only one ideal body out there. And I think objectively, we know that everyone's body is different. Our genetics are different. Like science has shown that every body operates in a different way depending on your environment, your systems, epidemiology. I'm going to ask you, Eling, a very simple question, but I feel like we can cover so many layers with this question of, is diet culture toxic? And if so, why?
Yeah. Short answer, yes. So toxic. And I feel like the ways I know that it's toxic is because it has been toxic to me. And
how has it been toxic to you?
Yeah, just growing up, and if the only messaging you're getting is that you should eat a certain way, your body should be a certain way, you're not given many tools to figure out like, hey, is this right for me? Or how do I, it's a really harsh way of thinking about food. And it puts a lot of responsibility on the person for things that they cannot necessarily control. We're basically programmed to have a certain type of body. Everyone's is different. And yet it was saying like, but please make your body look like this. And you're just like, how? I'm 15. I don't know. And I feel like I was totally living immersed in diet culture, as we all are. We don't choose that. Our parents are, our elders are. They didn't choose it either, but we get that messaging from so many places. And so the way I experienced diet culture was really, how do I find the right diet for me? What should I be eating? What should I not be eating? I would worry if I ate things that quote unquote were bad. Whether it was, there's just so many ways that it caused many anxious thoughts in me, particularly in college. Wow. How do I eat perfectly? And how do I look perfect? And so that's just speaking from a personal place, but the diet culture itself, it just ignores that. It ignores body diversity. It ignores the wealth of different ways that different cultures relate to food and use food. And I think the worst part is it disconnects people from themselves, and it makes people question and doubt themselves. And it makes people think that their bodies are not acceptable or that their choices are not right. And I just can't stand by a system that's going to do that and pretend it's doing it so that you can be healthy and good, but really is so destructive through and through.
Yeah, it's almost like the focus on just your weight is an incomplete message around your muscle mass, your genetics, your culture, the food that you're taking in, but also you talk about the relationship to food and how our relationship and emotional stance to food matters. Just like personally, I remember I think I was in 5th grade. I had just moved to a new part of LA, and my dad every week would make me fried bananas, my favorite little snack. He would package it in this aluminum foil. And I remember I had a friend who said, "What are you eating? Is that meat?" And I was like, no, it's a fried banana. It's a Filipino cuisine. I was like, do you want one? And he looked at it, took a bite of it, put it on the ground and stomped on it, and then walked away. And that was my earliest experience of covert racism of, I feel as if you're diminishing my culture. And it was also the first time I felt the need to hide my food and the types of food I ate. And I remember after that moment, I kept asking my dad, and I never told him why. I was like, can you just make me peanut butter jelly sandwiches for lunch? I don't want to take that to school. And it was the pain of watching my favorite food getting stomped on that I feel as if as an Asian American woman, we get made fun of for how our food smells at lunch, or those little covert messages that we get from people that we go to school with of whiteness is the ultimate way of eating and the ultimate way of consuming food. And so, Eling, can you speak more to whiteness and its influence on diet culture and how it can be harmful for us?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm so sorry that happened. And yet that is such a common anecdote. I feel that so many people have experienced so horrible, and creates that shame and creates that sort of question of, is something wrong with this thing that's right from that seemingly is right for me or right for my family. And the way that whiteness interacts with diet culture is that it's actually, I would say, so many ways. Where do I start?
It's such a big question, isn't it?
Just the ways that the types of foods that are acceptable, I think, first and foremost. If you were to just hear what sort of a diet, a classic diet is, what types of foods those are promoting, those are going to be mostly Western foods that it's almost impossible to fit foods from other cultures into those boxes. I often think about, you think of the classic examples like salmon and broccoli and quinoa or something. And of course they accept certain foods once they've gotten a health halo from other regions and cultures, but it takes a lot of work. Halo? Just this sheen, this marketing sheen. Oh, but this one's a really good food. This is that type of, some foods just have become marketed so well.
It's turmeric and chia seeds and things like that. The things that have always been in the earth, but somehow they're super now.
Yeah, become superfoods, and people make a lot of money off of selling them and things like that.
Oh my gosh, my mind is blown. How mass marketing can shift global perspectives around a food where it's literally just a bean or a seed. And now suddenly it's something that can magically shift your body and make you look. My mind is putting the pieces together.
Yeah, there's just so many ways that the messaging we're given about certain foods will demonize some and propel others into this superfood status. When our bodies don't really interact with food in that way. Of course, our body is going to respond to the food that we put in it. But I think the way that diet culture has made us fearful that there are good choices and bad choices. If you make a bad choice, then you failed, you're a bad person, or you're going to have a bad outcome. And so it's stripped all the nuance out of eating for some, but and I think whiteness comes into play in terms of what types of foods are acceptable, what types of bodies are acceptable, and really makes a lot of cultures reject foods that are important to them. And so I think a lot about it with Asian cultures with rice, where suddenly it was just sure, why don't you eat brown rice instead? Sure, some people really like brown rice, but that is not the rice we grew up eating. We grew up eating rice at nearly every meal. We had the 15-pound bag that sat underneath the sink.
Still have that bag.
Yeah. Huge bag of white rice. And that was just every night. Yeah. It's
so convenient too. It's I just put it in my rice cooker and I have food all week.
It is great. I just put some in the cooker right before this call. Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah. And it worried me for a while. I got really concerned about how much rice I was eating. When diet culture was at its peak for me, I was like, oh my God, I shouldn't be eating so much rice. It's an empty calorie, all of these things that you're told before I really understood nutrition science at all. And that's one. I think another one was like the sort of like things about MSG. There's just a lot of fear mongering and misinformation that like can demonize certain types of foods and certain cultures that then eat those foods and use those foods to sustain themselves. Yeah, many thoughts about just like how whiteness can impact how we feel about food for sure. And I think like body image is very much tied to that too. So right at the root of diet culture is the promotion of thin bodies. And diet culture will say, I promote a thin body because I promote a healthy body. So there's so many problems with that line of thought. But yeah, but body image, how does someone who doesn't look like the white thin ideal reconcile? Hey, I want to be accepted. I want to feel mainstream. I want to feel desirable or attractive. And there are certain traits about ourselves that we just cannot change. I think reaching for something that promises goodness in your body is such a natural desire. So it's maybe I will eat these types of foods and it will make me look a certain way, even though that part is not true. And then I will be really accepted. I'll be part of mainstream culture. I'll be part of the ideal. And I think what ends up happening for people of all racial backgrounds, but particularly non-white people, they'll be chasing that for a really long time if they cannot, accept their differences from the white ideal.
That's so enlightening to hear, because when you were talking about thinness and its toxicity in our culture, I started to take notes and like really draw lines of, okay, if I don't have the objective thin body, which is slim waist, thigh gap, like what society has deemed like the ideal body type, I don't think of myself as attractive, and it's going to affect what I wear. It's going to affect how I see myself. It's going to affect my psychology around my relationships and how I approach things. And it's going to create a sense of like lack in me. And even personally in my life, I've seen remnants of what diet culture has done to my self-confidence, my ability to dress. And it wasn't until I think February, my parents celebrated, I think, like 30 years of marriage and took our family to the Philippines. And the Philippines, I've noticed, has shifted from like local shops to mass market globalization of McDonald's foods, Denny's. We have a super center of just like American Western food that has like invaded most of the cities. And even in like Asian American culture, I feel that message, because America is such a superpower, has gone into the brains of different women, especially Asian American women, where like thinness is the ultimate like posture of being the best or dominating. And it's really sad. My voice just choked up really thinking about it. I'm really grateful for you, Eling, because you're allowing me to see the global impact of what this has done.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I think like it's a struggle within cultures. I think it's a struggle between white supremacy and other cultures, of course, but then also recognizing, hey, the harms that it does within one's own culture. I don't think any culture is totally immune to body image comparisons, colorism, stigmatizing different types of bodies or ways of being. And it's harmful all the way down. Yeah. So it is a lot to sit back and reflect on, like
so much to unpack and reflect.
Yeah.
I want to be respectful of your time though, because I know that you have a hard stop pretty soon. And so I guess my follow-up question to this is, if someone is listening to this and going, oh, I had no idea the way that I conceptualize and look at food has infected the way that I see myself, my culture, where I come from, how can they start to relearn what it looks like to embrace culture? Like, what advice would you give them? Granted, none of this is professional medical advice. Follow the advice of your medical doctor, obviously. But what, I guess, more of the emotional and relational piece, how would you advise people?
Sure. I think the first thing I would say is that evaluating what's become quite normalized in our relationship with food is having discomfort around food, feeling guilty when we eat, feeling a bit of shame when we eat something, and feeling rewarded when we eat something quote unquote good. And so the first thing I would say is, when we evaluate that, check in with yourself and see if that's really the type of relationship with food that you want. A lot of people think that's just the way it feels to be an eater. That, yeah, like some things like make me feel a little guilty. I shouldn't have done that. Or I worked out today, so I get to have this. I think you don't have to be struggling with a diagnosed eating disorder in order to feel really complicated, distressing thoughts about food. And I think there's an element of that's become quite normalized, that women and men all can connect over this disordered thought that some food is good, some food is bad. That shows us that like how pervasive and deeply conditioned it is for us to have dysregulated relationships with food.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
My mind is blown. When you feel guilty eating something, that is not because you ate something bad, but because that is a byproduct of a disordered eating thought that's been created by culture. That's wild to me.
Yeah. And it's so normal. All of us, I'm sure can really relate to that. And if we said it to a friend, I'm sure they would say, oh, me too. I shouldn't have done that. And we laugh it off. But
that's so wild, because just because it's normal doesn't mean it's healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So I would encourage everyone to just check in with themselves and see, hey, if I am having that thought, like is that okay with you? Would you be interested in trying something new? And it's really scary because the something new is like totally blowing up everything, the old way that we've thought about food. So of course that's super scary and uncomfortable, because we all want to, for the most part, want to feel like we're doing the right things for ourselves. I think that goes way beyond food. But yeah, I think it's, hey, those types of things that we've normalized and accepted to be part of the standard relationship food just doesn't have to be that way. And then I think the next part after that, if you've decided, hey, I'm not going to tolerate this, I don't want to live in this way, is reconnecting with the true cues of your body and using that as your true North Star a little bit, because diet culture is very external. It never really asks you to check in with your own body. It says, according to this plan, you should be eating this many calories. Usually doesn't say, how do you really feel on that? And are you liking how you feel on that? And so there are many answers that you can find within your own body. You can start with just checking in with your feelings of hunger. How do I know I'm hungry? What are the clues I get? What are the different types of hunger I feel? And on the same wavelength, what are my different fullness cues? How full do I get? Is that the same level of fullness I get after breakfast, same after dinner, same with different types of foods? How do I know I'm full? And then maybe a step beyond that would be like, okay, so when I am hungry, what do I think? How do I think about that? I'm motivated to go grab something to eat? Or why am I hungry? I can't believe I'm hungry. I shouldn't be hungry yet. And then if I'm full, is my first response, cool, I'm comfortable, I'm ready to stop eating and check in with engage with a different part of my day? Or is the feeling, I can't believe I got so full. This is unacceptable. I can't get this full again ever. I shouldn't be getting this full like this.
Wow.
So it's just checking in with your own responses to your body's cues. Are you judging them? Are you accepting them? How do you relate to them? Because I think those initial questions really open up a lot of answers around like how we relate to food. Sometimes people report that feeling hungry feels a little bit good. Oh, I did something good. I didn't overeat. And I think it's important to just see, okay, what messages have you received that's rewarding you for being a little hungry and demonizing you for being a little full? That maybe would just be a place to start. Yeah, there's so many more ways we can think about one's relationship to food. It's not the only eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, but it's more like, hey, are you having a lot of judgment about that specific thing? Are you really, not just accepting it, but feeling very judgmental and worried and anxious about those two sensations? That can give us a lot of clues.
I'm so grateful for you, and I want to be respectful of your time. And so I'll end with this. I want to acknowledge you for your ability to be vulnerable with me today, and now people that are going to listen to this episode. I'm thankful for your just bravery to follow what makes sense. And that's evident in the way that you teach people as well, and how it's translated into your relationship to food, where there's not one right way of doing things, but there's your way of doing things, and you should follow what makes sense to your body and begin to check in with yourself. I was really inspired by you, and now I have a full page of notes that I can come back to and just be like, oh, awesome. Eling said this, I'm going to reflect on that. Yeah. I'm so grateful for you.
Thanks, Helen. It's mutual. Thank you for, yeah, taking the time to chat and asking these amazing questions.
Yeah. I'm going to stop recording now.